How did I meet this person? I think it's all by accident. I came across his name in 13 letters that were sent to Cairo in the 20s and 30s of the last century. If you ask me to dedicate this project to somebody, I think it will be to him and his son. I remember that his son used to send me letters just some years ago telling me, "Dear new clan member of the family of us." He is the main key, the main reason behind the whole project. Sometimes you feel while you step into their world through letters, archival materials, diaries, you do not only step in their intellectual and political role as such, but you step in their personal life.
I was a professor of, especially of Islamic history in the West, and I was teaching fatwas, for instance, related to the West.
We have had quite a lot of students from Egypt, and actually all students from Egypt were coming from the Faculty of Languages and Translation from Al-Azhar University.
The study at Al-Azhar is the classical study, the quantity study. It means that you build up an accumulation of religious knowledge when it comes to classical Islam. And I think moving to Europe has, created a kind of another space for accumulating knowledge in a critical way.
Most of the Azhar students who came here to study, almost all of them got their MA degree with the highest distinction.
I met Amr when I was in Leiden University as a professor in the Religious Studies department. And we had this program in Islamic Studies. And Amr was a very curious student, very energetic, and turned to us in a class, that is, we in the Religious Studies department, for a class on the study of Islam in the West.
One of the original things in this research was that the researcher, Dr. Riyad, he started also to look for archives. And I vividly remember that how he discovered this archive of Zeki Kiram.
While studying this person, writing about him, publishing about him, the idea of Muslims in interwar Europe has become, mature in my mind.
I was very happy with these developments. I saw you were, this project was going to break new ground.
Then I thought I should apply for a bigger project which could be funded by the European Research Council at this time. It was back in 2013, and the European Research Council has funded it.
I met Dr. Amr Riyad, who came to Bonn, and it is there where he started writing the draft for his project proposal, which was fortunately for, I would say, all of us, accepted a year later when he submitted it.
We had a long Skype conversation. We talked about this institutional aspect of my work.
And then I guess we had a Skype interview where I was looking down, or where a tablet was looking up at me, with an interviewing committee which Dr. Riyad led. And then we met in the Netherlands a few times, and then we started working on the project.
I found out that there was this project starting at that point in Utrecht, and I was very much interested. I already knew the man behind the scenes of this project, and I thought I might as well apply because it is precisely on what I would like to do in my career, and I thought it was definitely something I can put my energies.
So in 2013, I decided to do my PhD, and when I saw the advertisement of the ERC project Muslims in Interwar Europe from Amr Riyad, I was very much interested in the different perspective. We applied for funding by the Swiss National Science Foundation, and also Amr Riyad agreed on being our international cooperation partner.
I was doing my PhD thesis in Leiden. I started in 2003, and it was about the works and thinking of the Muslim reformist Sheikh Muhammad Rashid Rida, the well-known student of Muhammad Abdu. A friend of mine phoned me one day that he, by accident, met one of the people working with the grandson of Sheikh Muhammad Rashid Rida in Cairo. And after getting his permission, I went to study the archive of Muhammad Rashid Rida in Cairo in 2005. And while I was working there, I came across 13 letters written to Rashid Rida, addressing Rashid Rida from Berlin, dating, the first one was dating in 28, 29, and then till 34, 35. The 13 letters contained very, very interesting information. One of them was addressed to Rida under Muharram wa Shakhsi, very confidential, in which Zeki Kiram was telling Rashid Rida many interesting anecdotes about Prince Faisal of Saudi Arabia, who was at this time Minister of Foreign Affairs in his father's dynasty, King Abdulaziz Al Saud. So the letters were very, very intriguing, but the person was not known, entirely unknown to me. So the only thing you have, the only information you have, it's his name, and Karlstraße, Karl Street number 10 in Berlin. This is the only thing you had at this moment. I start thinking, how should I, unpuzzle this name? How should I, identify him? Because this name does not come that often into Arabic, I thought of getting back to secondary sources, and one historian identified him as a Muslim dentist, the other identified him as a Muslim soldier in the First World War. Then I got an idea, if this name does not come that often into Arabic, what about if I check the telephone directory, das Telefonbuch on internet of Germany? And to my big surprise, I found two names with this family name. One of them lives in Kornwestheim, a small village in the neighborhood of Stuttgart, and I thought I'm gonna to call this gentleman. And when I called him, I asked him, is this a family of Zeki Kiram who lived in Karlstraße number 10 in Berlin in the 20s and 30s? The answer was more surprising. He said to me, yes, I am his son and I was born in this house in 1923. And then the story has started. I asked him, do you have family archive? He said, yes, you can come and see.
Da klingelt eines Abends das Telefon. Und an dem Apparat ist ein fremder Herr, den ich nicht kenne. Und er versucht, mit mir eine Verständigung zu finden, ob ich Arabisch spreche. Ich spreche aber nicht Arabisch. Englisch spreche ich auch nicht gut, das ist bekannt. Mein Englisch ist nicht gut. Ja, was dann? Holländisch? Nein, kann ich auch nicht. Dann ist das erste Gespräch mal zu Ende und dann macht er einen zweiten Versuch. Der gleiche Herr ist nochmal am Telefon. Und wir verständigen uns schließlich irgendwie mit einem deutschen Gespräch. Und er fragt, ob dieser Dr. Zeki Kiram aus Berlin ist und ob ich verwandt mit ihm bin. Da sage ich, ja, ich bin sein Sohn, das ist mein Vater in Berlin.
So I went there, I took the train, and then I went there and I found a marvelous archive which actually established for us the network of Muslims in interwar Europe.
Mein Vater ist 1886 in Damaskus geboren und sein Name ist Zeki Hashmet Mirza Kiram. Ich bin sein Sohn, Zeki Harun al-Rashid Kiram.
Can you imagine Harun al-Rashid, Zeki Kiram in Stuttgart? Zeki Kiram was an Ottoman officer who fought on the German side. In the First World War, he was the commander of the Bedouin troops in Al-Arish.
Und dann sagte ich glaube wörtlich, sie hat Gott geschickt, denn wenn sie nicht gekommen wären, das wäre jetzt alles verloren gewesen. Und ich kann es nicht aufheben, denn ich bin jetzt, damals war ich 83 oder 82, ich kann es nicht auf die Dauer aufheben. Also es wird verloren gehen. Aber sie hat Gott geschickt, sonst wäre das alles weg. Und dann am Ende des Besuches habe ich gesagt, nehmen Sie alles mit. In Leiden ist es besser aufgehoben als bei mir. Bei mir geht es verloren. Und dann haben wir große Pakete gemacht, nach Schwierigkeiten, weil kein Transporteur das mitnehmen wollte. Dann haben wir das auf die Post gegeben. Ich glaube 8 große Pakete waren es. Und dann ist alles nach den Niederlanden gegangen. Entschuldigung. Für mich war das eine Erleichterung. Und ich habe gesagt, jetzt habe ich keine Sorgen mehr. Alles ist gerettet. Ja? Das war für mich, ich bin frei. Jetzt bin ich frei. Und wenn ich sterbe, kein Problem. Alles ist in den Niederlanden. Alles ist gerettet.
These are the diaries, letters of his father from the First World War time, which for us very, very interesting and rich mine of information. How did Muslims live in Europe in the interwar period? When I came back here in this office in Leiden after finding the archive, I was very, very thrilled. And if you look at the archive, I mean, it was for me very, very interesting to categorize it, to look into it, into much details. And immediately I started scanning it. You see here, these are, for example, some letters which were sent to him by Saudi and Iraqi authorities regarding arms deals. Here, for example, I read this document. مقاولة بين الحكومة المتوكلية اليمنية حرسها الله بين الدكتور زكي كيرام. قد تعهد الدكتور زكي كيرام للحكومة اليمنية بتوريد 10,000 بندقية من الأسلحة الموزر. So it talks about, you know, exporting 10,000 Mauser rifles to Yemen.
الحين اليوم لو تقول انت لو تروح لعند اي يمني وتقول له زكي كرام، يمكن اول شيء يجي في بالهم دائما هي البندقيه الذي ارتبط البندقيه الالمانيه الماوزر الذي ارتبط اسمه به يعني. فيمكن الكثير ما يعرفوش خلفيته، ليش جاء اليمن، ما سبب انه يكون موجود في اليمن.
When it comes to the Yemen case in particular, Imam Yahya of Yemen, the king of Yemen at this time, the Zaydi king, was not interested at all in the European direct intervention in his country. So he made a kind of, he isolated Yemen from the European powers, but he was much more interested in getting second-hand weapons.
الإمام يحيى بويع بالإمامة في 1904، استمر في حكمه إلى 1948، فنحن نتكلم عن 44 سنة، لكن متقلبة بشكل كبير جدا.
How did the German authorities choose Zeki Kiram in order to accomplish these arms deals in the Arab countries at this time is a very complex question. Why? Because it was not only the German choice, but also the selection by these Arab countries. They should find somebody whom they should trust.
زكي كرام كان يجمع ما بين جانبين، جانب أصوله العثمانية، أصوله التركية، وارتباطه بالجيش العثماني، وأيضا كان يجمع ما بين ارتباطاته الألمانية. وهذا الأمرين سمح له أنه يستطيع أن يمارس بدور المهيئ والمنسق لإيصال الأسلحة وإيصال السلاح وبيع السلاح اللي تحتاجها اليمن في هذه الفترة.
The military deals succeeded only in Yemen, as far as the documents reveal. Why? You have to understand the complexity also of the time. Yemen was an Ottoman territory, and so there was no direct British intervention in it. While in Iraq, for example, if you look at it, it was, a British mandate. So working with the Germans would be, much more complex. The Saudi state was pro-British.
يختزل اليمن شخص الإمام يحيى. الإمام يحيى بنى دولة من خلال رجال اليمن، يعني فرجال اليمن الذي وثق مشاركتهم، وثق دورهم زكي كرام من خلال الصورة ومن خلال المكاتبات، تعطيك هذا المقاربة القريبة جدا الذي يعني ما كانش يمكن ان احنا نحصل عليها لولا انه شخص مثل زكي كرام كان معه كاميرا وكان بيصور.
What is for us as new as historians is in this family archive is his voice, because we have in the archive a sound fragment of with his voice.
أشهد المحترمين، إن للشرق والغرب ميزتان وكل منهما خاص بميزته. الغرب هو كالحيوان الميكا، فإنه أبدع لنا من الفنون والعلوم مما لا يتصوره الإنسان، وأنه أتى بعلومه إلى سرعة.
Is trying to say in the East we have the spirit, in the West we have the material, so if we combine them both, then we have a successful human being. Zeki Kiram was injured during the First World War, close to Suez Canal. So he was injured by, British fire. He was transferred in 1916 to Jerusalem for medical operation.
Kam nach Jerusalem in ein katholisches Krankenhaus. Und das Fieber war sehr hoch und dann ging es wieder runter und das ging rauf und runter. Dann sagt die Schwester, Herr Hauptmann, lassen Sie uns beten. Jetzt wird es schwierig. Denn sie ist Katholikin im Namen des Vaters, des Heiligen Geistes, und das geht nicht für einen Muslimen. Was sagt mein Vater? Ach Schwester, geben Sie mir lieber einen Kuss, das macht mich schneller gesund.
They couldn't help him, so because of the German-Ottoman allying in that period, the most logical destination was Berlin. he was put in the Charité hospital in Berlin, and there he stayed till 1921. So he stayed for almost 4 or 5 years for medical operation, for medical treatment, and doctors have decided to amputate his left leg.
In Berlin kam das Problem Sprache. Mit arabischer Sprache, aber auch mit Französisch und Russisch kam man da nicht durch. Man musste eigentlich Deutsch lernen. Also glaubte mein Vater, jetzt muss ich auf jeden Fall versuchen, Deutsch zu lernen. Und da suchte er sich die ersten Bücher. Er hatte auch vielleicht eine Lehrerin genommen, ich weiß es so genau nicht. Aber er suchte sich die ersten Bücher und suchte sich eine Buchhandlung, die in der Nähe von der Charité ist, um ein Deutschlernbuch zu finden. Auf diesem Wege kam er in die Buchhandlung von Seemann. In Seemann gab es eine Geschäftsführerin, denn der Inhaber, Herr Seemann, war ja auch im Kriege. Und diese Geschäftsführerin hatte gerade schwarze Kleidung an, weil der Vater gestorben war und sie war in Trauer. Und er findet dort eine junge Dame, blond und schwarz gekleidet wie viele Frauen im Orient. Er glaubt, es ist eine blonde Orientalin beinahe. Und er stellte fest, nein, es ist keine Orientalin, es ist eine Frau hier aus diesem Lande. Irgendwie verständigte man sich für Lehrbücher in deutscher Sprache und sie bediente ihn so gut sie konnte und er fand Gefallen an ihr.
And there he started to publish, to make just like, as a bookshop and publishing house where he published several books in German about Islam and Muslims. And there he changed this bookshop from being Gertrud Neuendorf to be Abend und Morgenland Verlag, which means in German the publishing house of Orient and Occident.
Und man fand einen Termin für die Hochzeit. Die Hochzeit fand statt in Berlin-Buchholz, wo meine Mutter Gertrud Neuendorf immer noch zu Hause war, bei ihrer eigenen Mutter. Die Hochzeit war ein Problem, denn es musste beim Standesamt geheiratet werden, es musste mit dem Imam geheiratet werden, es musste ein deutscher Pfarrer dabei sein und es musste in Istanbul geheiratet werden. Es gab also 4 Stationen, die zu erledigen waren.
You can imagine a Muslim, an Arab, coming to Berlin, marrying to a Christian woman who remained Christian till the end of her life. He never pressed on her to convert to Islam, so they remained just like living under one roof as a Muslim and a Christian. I bet that they have for all these years common understanding, although they did have, different religions, different cultural backgrounds.
Warum reden ihr zu Hause mit Jumena Arabisch und mit Elisabeth Niederländisch, damit das Kind dauernd diese 2 Sprachen hört. Ja? Aber in Berlin hat meine Mutter mit mir Deutsch gesprochen. Ja? Sie konnte ja nicht Arabisch. Ja, und dann war er auch viel verreist in seinen Pässen. Die Pässe sind ja in den Unterlagen drin. Da sieht man, welche Reisen das waren. Man kann also jede Reise mit Datum nachvollziehen. Visum, Ausreise, Visum, Einreise, Visum von dem Land, Visum von dem Land. Also mein Vater war ja viel fort. Und dann hat er gearbeitet zu Hause, am Schreibtisch gesessen. Ja, wie soll ich da Arabisch lernen? Das geht gar nicht, das kann nicht funktionieren.
When Kiram came here, he was an old military. So for him financially, he was in certain periods of his life was well off. So it means that it's not, a very needy person who came to Germany because his pension from the Ottoman government and Turkish government was okay to live with during the stressful time, the economic distressful time of Germany.
Mein Vater, Zeki Kiram, hatte in Berlin viele Kontakte zu Muslimen, aber auch zu sehr vielen Muslimen, die aus dem Orient nach Berlin kamen und deren erste Anstation, eine Beginnstation war häufig bei uns in der Familie. Neben den vielen Besuchen war es auch so, dass viele Leute, die aus dem Orient nach Berlin kamen, häufig als erste Anlaufstation meinen Vater besuchten, weil sie in Berlin eben sonst nicht überall eine Anlaufstation hatten. Unter anderem passiert eines Tages Folgendes. Das Telefon klingelt, es ist die Mittagszeit, meine Mutter ist in der Küche und mein Vater kommt reingelaufen und sagt, Shekib ist in Berlin, wir besuchen in einer halben Stunde, wird er hier sein und wir haben nichts zu essen. Was hast du denn da in der Küche? Da sagt meine Mutter, ach, ich wollte dich eigentlich überraschen. Ich habe ein Rezept von Paprikaschoten gefüllt von einer Wienerin. Ach, das kannst du doch nicht kochen, hast du doch nie gelernt. Also mein Vater probiert das und stellt fest, ach, die sind eigentlich ganz gut, die kann man essen. Als Shekib eine halbe Stunde später kommt, isst die Gesellschaft also diese Paprikaschoten. Shekib isst recht viel davon. Und am Ende sagt er, also das waren die besten Paprikaschoten, die ich je in meinem Leben gegessen habe.
Shekib Arsalan ended up in Berlin after the war in order to lobby for a kind of continuation of collaboration between Germany after the First World War and Ottomans, who were just like, having some nostalgic feelings towards the caliphate, and they wanted just like, to save the caliphate and or either to continue to re-establish it at a certain moment.
So Shekib Arsalan and Rashid Rida were both students of Muhammad Abdu. Of course, we are talking about two different types of intellectuals. Rashid Rida is a classical Muslim religious scholar. Arsalan is a cultivated man, an intellectual, and also politician, someone who served as an Ottoman in the Ottoman Parliament, and who had the chance to gather a lot of experience throughout his life.
We have to appreciate that Pan-Islamism itself evolved in terms of activities.
They really wanted to spread Islam in the broadest sense of the word, and that's also why these mosques and other groups where they got together were quite an open space and quite a fluid space as well. People from different Sunnis came there and Shia came there, and it was these mosques almost became in a way sort of embassies that attracted a lot of Muslim dignitaries, that whenever they went to the UK or to Germany or to France, they would go to the mosque and would be photographed there or give a speech.
The relationship between Shekib Arsalan and Rashid Rida was revivified in the process of the independence movements, especially the Syrian independence movement, in which Rashid Rida was very active.
That is Muslim revolutionary activity, mainly linked to what was happening in Russia, and that is with the Bolsheviks. They tried to get Bolshevik help to get all of Islam up in flames against the Western oppressor.
So when Rida came and this whole group of Syrians came, they contacted him in order to show them around and to show them the ropes, like we say. And when the Congress, the Syrian Congress in Europe, in which they took part, was finished, they traveled to Berlin, and Arsalan introduced Rashid Rida to Zeki Kiram.
I think if we look at Berlin at this time, we should imagine a center of Arab immigrants. And when we are talking about Arab immigrants at this time, they were students, political exiles, and some people who just settled in Germany because of this mixed marriage, also with German women. Zeki Kiram was part of this immigrant network. And Shakib Arsalan, during his stay from 21 to 25, gathered all those people around him.
Also, mein Vater, Zeki Kiram, hatte zwei Ideale. Ein Ideal war, dass die arabische Halbinsel sich politisch vereint, dass die Araber untereinander Frieden halten, dass sie sich untereinander verstehen. Es muss ja nicht eine einzige Regierung geben, aber es muss ein Verständnis da sein. Das war sein eines Ziel, sein politisches Ziel. Und er hatte ein kulturelles Ziel, das war das zweite. Er wollte, dass das Christentum und der Islam, besonders die Christen und die Muslimen, sich besser verstehen. Das sieht man allein aus einem ganz wichtigen Beispiel.
I started to look into Swiss archives just to know what was the role of Switzerland in the topic of Muslims in interwar Europe. So I found out that in the Swiss archive there was not only the famous file of Shakib Arslan, they had other files of other Arabs who came to Switzerland during the interwar period.
Arsalan was having all these anti-colonial activities from Switzerland, organizing protest movements, pushing independence, resistance movements, etc. And the Swiss government had two views on that matter. The foreign policy logic said, well, we have to invest in Arsalan, meaning we have to tolerate what he's doing, because one day when the Arab countries get their independence, we could profit from that. We could say we were on the good side, we always supported the Arab independence movement, so we are an ally of the Arab movement.
They had other files of other Arabs who came to Switzerland during the interwar period. So what is very interesting is that the Swiss administration and the police started to open files with the name Islamistische Umtriebe, which means kind of Islamic machinations, Islamic political activism. And it is interesting that there they started to report on all kinds of activities of what they understood as Muslims.
There were discussions about how to create a European Islam and how to work together, really, and that there were these sort of high-profile converts who really saw Islam as a possible future or really a benefit to Europe.
On the other hand, the Minister of Interior Affairs had a big problem with Arsalan's activities because he was inviting all sort of anti-colonial activists to his home. And we're not only talking about Muslims and Arabs, but also others. And this was a big security concerns for them, and it put them in a very difficult situation with the colonial powers.
If one looks carefully into Swiss history, that Switzerland was finally of the colonial experience of Europe.
When we say who profited from whom, it is a two-way process, and I think this is the best way to look at it, because it's really very complex and nuanced.
So what is really interesting, if you go through the file of Shakib Arslan, is that the Swiss administration put a lot of efforts to know what he did. I mean, what kind of activities he did. So they collected a lot of letters of him, but since they were in Arabic, they needed help. So what they did, they asked a missionary, a priest who lived for a long time in the Middle East, to do translations. So if you open the file of Shakib Arslan, you will find original letters written in Arabic, and then the translation.
If we yield to reading the archival materials, I would say they were mostly used in a successful way to achieve some political goals which Europeans saw.
So yes, they used him to a certain degree, but he also used them. So it was, in that sense, I guess, the best win-win situation he could have at the moment.
Als die Amerikaner Berlin besetzten, sie waren ja wohl als Erste dort, ich glaube, sie waren die Ersten in Berlin, hatte meine Bücher, das war für ihn das Wichtigste, diese Vermittlung zwischen dem Orient, zwischen dem Islam und dem Christentum, dass die Bücher gedruckt werden. Als Kriegsverbrecher, wieso gerade als Kriegsverbrecher, kann ich nicht sagen. Das ist der Grund, der dahinter steckt, war allein wahrscheinlich nur das, was an Kontakten da war. Und aus einem Brief, den ich später oder aus dem Tagebuch erfahren habe, hat er im Krankenhaus offensichtlich sehr viel gelitten. Und er schrieb an einen Freund, das habe ich aber später erst aus den Tagebüchern in der Übersetzung gehört, dass er Hunger hat und sein Freund in Ägypten möge ihm genügend zu essen schicken. Wie weit das gekommen ist, weiß ich nicht.
Zeki Kiram died in 1946 in the American hospital, military hospital. About his last days, we don't know very much, except that he was very, very ill, fragile, died of prostate cancer. Who is Zeki Kiram? Zeki Kiram, after doing this research for all these years, was born in Syria, Damascus in particular, in 1886. Born within a family which he claimed to be originally Persian, coming to Syria in the 16th, 17th century. He joined the cadet school in Damascus, where he was trained as a military, and then later he moved to Istanbul to study in the military academy in Istanbul, and after that he became an officer in the Balkan War, where he fought on the Ottoman side as an Arab officer, and later became a commander of the Bedouin troops in Al Arish in Sinai. His wife Gertrude lived and became very, very old. His son told me that his mother lived with him till the end of her life, and he felt very responsible for her. He was very, very loyal and compassionate about her, but he didn't have the chance to take care of his father, who died when he was a teenager. The ERC project was thought and written here at the University of Leiden. We got the grant when I was working in Leiden, but most of the research has been done when the project was transferred to the University of Utrecht. This is from 2014 to 2017, and from October 2017 on, we transferred the project to the University of Leuven, where we have continued the rest of the research project for 2 years. This project, we are working together in it in order to fulfill the targets and work packages of the project, which, first of all, the religious institutions and conversion to Islam. How did these religious institutions, especially mosques, played not only the religious role, but also the political role as European powers wanted it?
These institutions became quite important Muslim, almost embassies in these places in Europe, because they were always visited by dignitaries who came from the Muslim world or from other places. And then you also have in France the Mosquée de Paris, which was very much a sort of colonial propaganda effort as well on the French, by the French authorities. But that mosque was opened in 1926. So you have these very visible, important Muslim spaces, so to say, that started to develop and were created in this period rather than much later. This is really when the foundations were laid down for the development of Muslim institutions also after the war. But in order to create these institutions, or not create, but to aid in these institutions, for instance, the German Foreign Office also paid for certain things to do with the Berlin Mosque, and then the French Mosque was really a project of the French state.
The second work package is dealing with the idea of political Islam and pan-Islamism. How did these Muslim activists unite their forces in order to compose an anti-colonial movement from within?
In my research, I found that pan-Islamism, or rather pan-Islamists, come in many shapes and sizes. They fluctuate. I mean, you can find them on the political spectrum from far right to far left.
So which means that they were using European soils in order to counter against these colonial activities and behavior in the Muslim world.
What's interesting is they collaborate with each other. They see themselves as part of one group of Muslims.
We have to understand something. They were not the only people who had these anti-colonial strategies. Many European leftists, many European political activists were also against these colonial encroachments in the Muslim world, and therefore they collaborated together.
When the Bolshevik Revolution erupted in Russia, it impressed many Muslim elites by its message. Arslan actually met at least Trotsky a few times, but did not have access to Lenin in that period of 1921 because he was busy with the Third International.
So within this sub-project, within this work package, we try to understand what kind of strategies and political mechanism those Muslim activists have used in order to counter Europe from within. The third work package is more intellectual cultural, which emphasize the aspect or stresses some aspects related how did these Muslims living in Europe perceive Europe from within.
By looking at the state archival documents in Egypt and in France, for example, you see that Egypt became interested in having a foreign or a cultural diplomacy that operated not just in the Mashriq. Someone like Taha Hussein, he built an institute for Islamic studies in Madrid. He built one in London. He created a chair for Arabic and Islamic studies in Nice in France. another one in Athens in Greece.
How did they make an image about Europe? You read in their writings and their correspondences, on the one hand, they saw in Europe the ugly colonizer. On the other hand, and on many, many other aspects, they appreciated Europe as a civilization. They appreciated Europe as a social life. They appreciated Europe as a question of progress. So on the one hand, Europe is ugly because of this, European intervention and misbehavior in some Muslim parts of the world. And on the other hand, Europe is their own interactions. Europe is their mixed marriages. So these are two different levels among many, many other levels by which those Muslims saw Europe. So if you would like to understand Europe through Muslim eyes in the interwar period, I think this project, could tell something about it. All in, our team members in a joint work try to put all these intriguing aspects related to the history writing of Muslims in interwar Europe in a more global and more transcultural perspective.
The program, I direct a program called Global Islamic Studies at Connecticut College, and the sort of associations that American students have with Islam is always the Middle East, and always with Muslims living in the Middle East and kind of staying there, and with Arabic. This project is filling a gap, but also I think bringing up a lot of topics that will help us better understand today as not being such an unusual time.
What I think is really interesting in the project of Amariyat is that we do not look what Europe brought to the Middle East, but we are looking into how Arabs contributed to European history, which is totally different from the way how I was trained.
This project adds a dimension to the history of Islam in the West. It adds a period.
So it was, I think, that start of discovery into the presence of people that had hardly been studied on the basis of materials, sources in Europe itself, but also in the Muslim world.
And why is this important? Because we want to understand present-day phenomena in the light of historical developments. This is the sense of history in general, not only for Islam, but human history in general.
The new thing of the ERC project was and is, it looked not at the period which had already been covered in the past. No, it looked, as far as the period was concerned, to the interbellum. And it also looked to the intellectuals who came to Europe and how they contributed to intellectual life in the West.
It's a very, very small, tiny idea emerging in a family archive in Cairo, leading to me to Germany. And by the way, by the same telephone directory trick, I have discovered other archives in Europe, and which has created a huge network of Muslim activists on European soils. In the last years, we have tested the hypothesis of Muslims, whether they were visitors or colonial victims. And I think they were neither visitors nor colonial victims, but they were engaging actors in European history.